Connecticut, 1977, a place that, at the time, felt steady, predictable, safe in the way many communities across the country believed they were. Families knew their neighbors, children played outside, and even as the world beyond them was changing, many towns held on to the belief that danger was something that happened somewhere else. But for one family, that belief would be shattered in an instant, and what followed would leave questions that would linger for decades. This is the story of Renee Freer. Hello, friends. My name is Marcia, and this is Midwest Murders, where we explore the unsolved cases that still haunt America. In 1977, much of Connecticut still carried a quiet suburban rhythm, especially outside its larger cities like Hartford and New Haven. Neighborhoods were close-knit. Children walked to school, rode their bikes through the side roads, and spent long periods of time outdoors without constant supervision. It wasn't seen as risky. It was normal. But beneath that sense of normalcy, the country was in a period of transition. The 1970s had brought rising awareness of violent crime. High-profile cases were beginning to make national headlines, and for the first time, people were starting to confront a difficult truth. That danger didn't always come from strangers passing through. Sometimes it came from within familiar surroundings. Still, in many communities, that realization hadn't fully taken hold. There was still a belief that children were safe close to home, that neighbors looked out for one another, that if something went wrong, someone would notice. Cases like this would begin to challenge that belief in a very personal way, because when a child disappears from a place that feels safe, it doesn't just take a life, it changes how the entire community sees the world around them. Renee Freer was 8 years old, a third grader at Stepney School. Most people knew her as Giggles. She was friendly, outgoing, the kind of child who would talk to just about anyone. Her mother, Felicia, had recently separated from Renee's father, John, and had moved Renee and her 5-year-old brother, Nathaniel, into the house at 33 William Street in Monroe with her parents. William Street was a dead end, lined with single-family homes with very little traffic, the kind of place where you noticed who belonged there and who didn't. On June 22, 1977, Renee left home just after dinner to play with the neighborhood kids, as she usually did. It was a warm evening, the evening before the last day of school. Renee was eagerly anticipating the start of summer vacation. Numerous neighbors recalled seeing Renee playing with other children at the end of the road. She was last seen around 6:30 that evening, a short distance from her home as she was delivering strawberries to a nearby neighbor. Renee's mother had gone to the local grocery store to buy ingredients so she could bake cookies for Renee to take to her class the following day. When she returned about 8 p.m., it was getting dark, and Renee wasn't answering her when she called out. This was an era when children of all ages knew they needed to be home by the time the streetlights came on. If you weren't, you could count on a parent or a sibling to come looking for you. Renee's mother enlisted the help of neighbors and friends to look with her. When they were unable to find Renee by 9:15, she was reported missing. Police responded immediately, likely not overly concerned. It was a time when children were assumed to get caught up in an activity and forget the time, rather than being abducted, or worse. Police fanned out across the area. Less than an hour later, at 10:12 p.m., in a wooded area off Williams Drive near Hattertown Road, just a few hundred yards from her home, police found her. She was found near a makeshift fort where she and other children often played. She was fully clothed and had died from 2 crushing blows to the head. There was no sexual assault. An 8-pound rock, believed to be the murder weapon, was found near her body. Scrapings from underneath her fingernails and hair samples were collected and sent to the FBI lab for analysis. Police interviewed more than 100 people, used hypnosis, polygraph tests, and psychics to find who was responsible. No motive was ever established. Renee's funeral was under the direction of the Reverend Luther C. Pierce. She was laid to rest in the St. Michael's Cemetery. A town-wide fund drive to benefit the family was organized and sponsored by the Stepney PTO. It was terminated within days at the request of Renee's mother. Renee's mother died in 2020, never knowing how her daughter's case would end. In 1992, 15 years after the murder, police did report that they had a very good suspect in the case, but they didn't have enough evidence to charge him. He was only identified as a juvenile under the age of 14 when the murder occurred and was known to Renee. In July 2025, police finally submitted a juvenile arrest warrant for the individual. However, prosecutors would not sign off. The law in effect at the time bars a murder prosecution due to the suspect's age, and the statute of limitations for manslaughter had run out. Given the conclusive opinion of the state's attorney, Renee's case was officially closed. In late 2025, a petition for Renee's law that would change Connecticut's law to ensure that murder, especially the murder of a child, could always be prosecuted no matter the age of the perpetrator, began to wind its way through the legislative system. As of the filming of this video, the petition is still an active advocacy campaign. You can sign the petition by going to the Justice for Renee Facebook group or change.org. I've linked both in the description below. For decades, this case lived in uncertainty. A child taken, a family left waiting, a community left wondering who could have done this and why. But in the end, investigators did find their answer. They know who was responsible for the death of Renee Freer. And yet, there will be no arrest, no trial, no courtroom where the truth could be laid out in full. Because under Connecticut law at the time, a child under the age of 14 could not be prosecuted for a crime like this. So the case was closed. But not in the way most people think of when they hear the word solved. There will be no public reckoning, no formal justice. Only the quiet weight of an answer that came with limits. And for those left behind, that leaves a difficult kind of question. Not who did this, but whether knowing is enough. If you have thoughts or theories about this case, please leave them in the comments below. Until next time, stay curious, stay vigilant, and may the truth reveal itself in the shadows.